any Star Wars Rebel. Oh, we're going to be sharing those microphones. So, notice the guys grab the
It'll be
microphone.
10 o'clock by the time you bring all of us up with this introduction.
Any Young Justice fans? Star Wars Rebels fans?
Yeah!
How about Vanessa Marshall, our Wonder Woman? Batman Ninja? You guys watch that? Yeah! The Batman from that, as well as from Batman Arkham Origins, I can speak. Roger Craig Smith. All the way in the back. Filming some kind of astrology, I'm sure. Astronomy. Okay. Dueling Batmans, I like it. This will be like the Batman 80 panel again. This will be fun. Where's Kevin? How about Grimm? Anybody a Grimm fan? Really? Was that all I got? I love Grimm. I never miss a damn episode. Friday nights, man. The captain is here. Say hi to Sasha Ruiz. Hal Jordan. Okay, critters. Any Critical Role people in this room? We got Travis Willingham here. He's Superior Man! Nobody uses the stairs. Don't you know comics people are klotzes? Watch. Producer and director, you've seen all of his movies, because if you're here, I know you have. Say hi to Sam Liu. Hey, come on out. You have those two choices. Oh, he sacrifices because the architect of modern superhero animation and Johnny Quest's clone is here, Bruce Timm. While Bruce is coming up, we got a couple of people we do have to welcome. One of the original members of the production team that created this great graphic novel comic story, Dave Johnson. Is here in the audience tonight. Our casting and dialogue director, the guy that told all these people how to say the words, Wes Gleason.
Yes!
And the man responsible for that incredible score, Freddie Weidman, is out here somewhere. Way back there. Oh, and there's a couple of really good geeks in the audience. Hey, Legion of Superheroes animated fans here? Yeah. We got Yuri Lowenthal sitting in the audience. Superman from there. And if you like Gotham or 12 Monkeys, he brought his date Todd Stashwick this evening. You know how you guys all send in emails to James Olsen? So do those guys. All right, I dropped all my cards, so I don't know what I'm asking. Oh, hey Gary, Patrick Daly. Patrick Daly still here? That man came all the way from Kansas for this.
Gary, are there any special features on this Red Sun thing? Like any other cartoons or anything, maybe? Like something that maybe Roger Craig Smith might be in? No, sorry, did I steal your thunder? Sorry.
No, but I don't have the press release with me, so I can't say it right off the bat. But if you go to your favorite local website, your favorite fan site, you'll see everything that is involved in this film. All the good. What are you talking about?
The Phantom Stranger short?
Very good point. We have a short called The Phantom Stranger. You guys are brutally aware of this, correct? The Phantom Stranger with Peter Serafinowicz as the Phantom Stranger himself, and Michael Rosenbaum as Seth, the bad guy. I thought you meant all the other.
Oh, there's some other good groupies.
There's some really good stuff.
There's free memberships to the American Communist Society.
So this story was fascinating when it was published, and it's kind of timely today. Did you do any tweaking to the story to continue the relevance?
Not really. I mean, it's, you know, it's weirdly, I think Jason and I were talking about this backstage, it's not, strangely, it's not that political a story. I mean, it is, but it's not, I don't think there's anything really kind of super pertinent to what's going on here, and if there had been something in the comic that did kind of, you know, line up with what's going on right now in the world, maybe we would have leaned into it, but we didn't want to add anything to that. So, I mean, I certainly know how I'm going to vote in November, and if I thought that it would move the needle any way towards that direction, maybe I would have done it, but I don't think I did.
My mind is a whirl with the possibilities. What made James DeMatteis the right guy to write this story? You worked with him enough?
Yeah, he's a terrific guy. We worked with him for many, many years. I mean, he wrote a lot of some of our best stuff on Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, and specifically on adapting like tricky stories. Like he's a guy who adapted For the Man Who Was Everything for us, based on the famous Alan Moore story. So I thought he would be just the guy for this.
Two Elseworlds. I had a list when I was a kid. 2 Elseworlds stories in 2 years. Gotham by Gaslight, now Red Sun. What are the intricacies of bringing an Elseworlds story to animation? Thank you, Sam Liu. And you got any favorites you'd like to see made someday?
The 2 Elseworlds books that jump out at me for like just being really crazy and weird that I would like to do. There's a Superman one called Speeding Bullets, which is kind of like a 40s noir crime version of Superman. And then there's a really strange Batman one called the Doom That Came to Gotham that Mike Mignola wrote. So I would love to take a crack at that one. How about you, Sam? Anything?
It's funny because the Doom That Came to Gotham, I actually asked Mike Farland for the graphic novel because yeah, I'm really into that sort of Cthulhu type. Yeah, I love that stuff. So.
Sam, tell us your life story.
Oh, I was born. Nobody wants to.
For those of you on the panel who were familiar with the story before you got the role, what were your? Is there anyone who was familiar with the story before you got the role?
This is the geekiest room I've ever been in my life, and I'm in Star Wars and Harry Potter. This is, and Star Trek. I mean, I am so out geeked. Did anybody know this?
Yeah, my son is a comic book fan, and so he's the one who turned me on to this story many years ago, saying that it was super cool. He basically just told me the story, though, and I never read it, and I never read the script either, so this to me was a big surprise, and it was a really great story. I love the feminist bit to it, too. I thought it was very cool.
Well, that kind of leads into my second half of that question is, each of you is taking on an iconic role, but it is an Elseworlds tale. It's not the Batman we know. It's not the Wonder Woman we come to expect all the time. Were you thrown a little when you first read the script? Did it change the way you wanted to approach the character? Diedrich wants Amy to answer. Roger's up.
Well, I've played Wonder Woman 2 other times as far as the DC films go. Of course, Justice League, Crisis on 2 Earths, and then Flashpoint Paradox. And Crisis on 2 Earths, she was sort of what one would expect, pretty phenomenally. And then Flashpoint Paradox, she was obviously the opposite of what one might expect. Ask Aquaman. Then in this one, it makes so much sense that she says half the things that she said, but she's never really been given the mic, as it were, to sort of give voice to, telling a man to figure it out, etc. So I thought that was really interesting, and it was very well directed by Wes Gleason. Thank you, Wes. So that moment was just sort of, it came and went, and it was immaterial to a certain extent, and I did not expect to see that on the script, but it was fun to bring it to life.
women, am I right?
Diedrich and Jason, you two are traditionally cast as a villain and a good guy or a geek. You don't get the opposite roles, and in this case, you got sort of the opposite roles. What was that like for you, and how hard is it to work against the typecasting you two usually get?
It was interesting for me to be cast in this. I was extremely grateful, and you know, every part has a different challenge. This one, he's kind of the bad guy, but he ultimately ends up being the good guy. It's so morally complex. For the medium, which has always been underestimated, it is an incredibly complicated story, and there's no clear, good guy or bad guy in it. And I thought that was super. I thought that was really cool the way that was handled. There's no black and white, and there so often is in this world, and but in this alternate universe, which is closer to our own, oddly enough, there's only gray, and there's moral choices that you make along the way, and I thought that was extremely well handled.
Yeah, the really corny answer is that when on screen, no, I want to look at you, Gary. I'm sorry, I don't look at them. I'm looking at you. On screen, most of those parts that are thought of as bad guys, the only decent ones are the ones that are three-dimensional and complex, because you only really hate them or are scared of them if you recognize them as human beings. And so they're, the most high-profile one being in Harry Potter, he's a racist, and he's trying to make Hogwarts great again, and he's scared of he's scared of the present, because he looks back to a time when people like him rule the world, and they don't anymore. He'd like to turn the clock back, but he's a coward. He's a bullying coward, and he seems like a human being to me. And this, I don't know that, as Diedrich said, I don't think any of them. But what's great about it, I don't know if it's grey, because grey sounds muddy to me, but I think what it is there are no perfect solutions. So it's funny. One of the members of the people who are interviewing us outside asked me what it's like to play Superman as a bad guy. But he lands in Russia, and he's the same Superman we've always known. He's a guy who is absolutely obsessed with, or concerned with, dedicated to fairness and justice and truth. He sees it through the prism of the world he's growing up in and he's exposed to, which is a system designed to try and be completely fair. Just the system doesn't quite work, and there are things that are kept from him until they're brought in front of his face. And I would say that's probably similar to every system. And so, what I loved about this, I slightly disagree about. It's interesting, we had the conversation, but I took something entirely different about it. It's not political with a giant P. I think it's incredibly political with a small p. Because at this time in this country, in my country too, people have dug themselves into positions, entrenched themselves into positions, and even in the face of evidence that should make them go, wait a second, how can I be so absolutely adamant and sure that I'm right? Because that's true, and this isn't happening. But it's too late, because they've kind of built this wall around themselves and defined themselves. And that's what I love about this story. I don't make it sound like a message. It's you've just seen it's great piece of entertainment, but it's, you've got a presidential election coming up here, and I don't know what anyone else thinks, but it seems to me there are no perfect people to be in the White House. The person who's there at the moment, I would say, it's maybe slightly less than perfect, and maybe none of the candidates who are looking to replace him are perfect. But here we have Superman, who is in many ways the perfect human being, the most ethical, moral superhero that's ever been dreamt up. And even he, given absolute power, doesn't have a fucking clue what to do. He's not sure. He's not sure which way is the right way to run the world, and any decision you make has some dire consequences. And that's one of the things I loved about this script. I thought it reflected back exactly the world we live in, where there are no perfect solutions, but you better find the best imperfect solution and try and do it with some compassion. I have no idea what the question was.
Well, you answered it perfectly. Amy, there have been a great number of...
Thanks for that very mild ripple of applause.
There have been a number of very well recognized performances of Lois Lane, both on live action and in animation. Did any of that influence you, or how did you choose to approach this Lois Lane?
Yeah, I mean, I think growing up as like a child of the 80s, I had a very specific Lois Lane in mind of who Lois Lane is, and I was saying even before I wanted to be an actor, I wanted to be Lois Lane. Like she was who you wanted to be when you grew up. So I was really excited to get to play the part, and then I read the script and I was very confused because I was like, no, wait, why is she with Lex Luthor? This is wrong. And but so as I continued reading and realized maybe he's not the bad guy, maybe she is still some of the same person. She still holds these beliefs. She still asks the hard questions and wants good answers and fights for what she thinks is right. And so I again forgot the question, but yes. But
What was your
it
influence? The question was,
was
why hasn't Lex Luthor come up with some way to stop balding, given his attitude?
Wigs, for example?
Several of you had particularly physical performances, Travis most notably. Are you just an absolute wreck in the booth at that point? I mean, what's going on there? Are you beating up the microphone and yourself?
Yeah, lots of sweat. Lots of sweat drenching through the shirt and the underarms, change of clothes. And then Wes just, of course, asks you to do it naked, which gives you the most real performance. It's all about, removing the layers. Is that not what you guys do in the...
Only at the audition.
No, it's great. It's great fun, especially in the ADR sessions where the animations come back and you get to chase picture. It just lifts the performance that much more. You get to see them just absolutely hammering away at each other, and so you're inspired to just give it all you got.
You save most of that for the ADR then?
I mean, you do a little bit beforehand, but it's also just whatever you come up with in your mind, whatever's from whatever is there in the script. But what actually comes back when they've animated it is just so much more, and it's nice to match that picture and drive it home. Seeing Superior Man all bizarroed out, if you will, and having arms one size larger than the other, that kind of changes the vocal performance as well. So it lends to it.
Hand a microphone down to Roger and Sasha there. Oh, good. Roger, for starters with you. You voiced Batman in a couple of interesting incarnations. How did this experience differ for you?
This is easily the most unique. I mean, obviously with the accent, but this was my exposure to the Elseworld world, and very quickly I was like, this whole 10 seconds thing, those people didn't leave that building, did they? That's not a Batman I'm familiar with. It was like, yeah, sorry. So, I mean, I've answered a couple questions when we were doing the press for this about the similarities between the character that I've already played in the past and this one, and I still think this is what this film does so great, is the perspective shift of things, where you can understand that it's like, this is still a version of Batman that we know, in terms of he feels that what he's doing is correct and right, which arguably almost all the characters do, and he's got similar motivations to things that have kind of motivated him to do what he's done in other iterations of Batman that we're familiar with. And so in one way, I mean, other than the weird breaking of his policy, it's still kind of a similar Batman to what we know, just with a desperate attempt at a Russian accent.
We'll start at Sasha's end, and you can pick your own, but did you have a favorite scene in the film?
Favorite scene in the film?
Favorite scene in the film. Something appealed to you most.
I mean, I'm blanking, of course, right now, because, of course, when you would ask me a question, nothing would come to mind. However, I did love the film. I just want to talk about the film as a whole, because it's kind of funny. I think I'm the only one who actually speaks Russian on this panel. Coincidentally, that was my heritage. I mean, my father was born, that title credit, like 1946 Soviet Union. My father was born in 1946 in the Soviet Union. So that was a very interesting moment right at the outset of the film. But no, the whole thing for me just kind of spoke on several levels, of obviously professionally and just as a fan of, genre and stuff, but personally, because I was raised kind of, in the shadow of all of this. My parents fled that part of the world, and subsequently, taught me sort of some of the horrors of it, and but again, watching it, again, it's a perspective, right? It depends who's telling the history, who's telling the story. That'll obviously always dictate who the hero is, and that really resonated with me on many, many levels. So I just turned the question into something I really wanted to answer.
That worked.
Yeah.
Had a way.
That's how you do it.
That's PR 101. I like it. Anybody else have a favorite scene, or should we let the fans of you here?
I will say my absolute favorite scene is when Superior Man calls out Superman and yells, "Superman!" Like, it was flawless. I loved that moment. That was badass.
I have to say, I thought this whole thing was exceptionally well directed animation. And one of the things that I really love and miss in a lot of American animation, but they use it in, let's say, Princess Mononoke, for example, are moments of silence. I really did not expect that. The moment with the Chinese ambassador, for example, when they're just looking at each other, and he asks him a direct question, and he takes his time. And it's really beautiful because it makes you think. And so often animation just comes at you over and over and over again. That said, the action sequences were amazing, but the pauses I thought were just fabulous because it did reinforce this idea of which way are you going to go. There's choices that you have to make in your life. And when Superman and Wonder Woman were speaking, the quiet just really spoke to me. It was, I thought, beautifully directed in that way. So that's all I want to say.
I think my favorite scene, if that's the question, I liked when Wonder Woman came down and split everybody up and laid it all out, and it was really badass.
I was actually saying before, so I said to you, Sam, that I liked, akin to the pauses of the silence, giving it the space, like the fact that a lot of the scenes don't end on a kind of button end line and cut to. They end like moments do with a bit of contemplation or someone having to go away and think about something. And people don't have the kind of great snappy comeback because they're slightly thrown by what's just been said to them. And it's just rare to find sophisticated adult storytelling that's also entertaining on this in this world. That's why it's so refreshing.
Well, I love the music all the way through, and it's
There you go, Freddie.
well done, bravo. You're a genius. That was amazing. Because having read the comic book, that's sort of one version. Then having read the script by myself, that's another version. Then to have interacted and then to see it with sound all together. So I would say that is sort of my favorite overall thing. But the very moment that took my breath away was when Superman is saving the world. And there's that callback to Svetlana's line, and then the light flash, and then silence. I thought that was an elegant use of silence in contrast to the music right there. It really punctuated that sacrifice.
So the music was great, but best of all when it was switched off.
There you go, Freddie.
It made the silence more powerful, and the absence of sound. There was room for emotion in there, much like you said that the beats of silence were full of emotion as well.
A scene that stuck out to me was when Superman pulled Svetlana and the other people out of the mines or wherever they were, and he knelt in front of the sunset. I almost inferred that he could hear her heartbeat slowing down. I don't know, maybe that just was my interpretation of it, and he just knew that there wasn't anywhere to go, just take this moment, give her this sunset, and he just listened to her go quietly. And the way that they animated his expression just really touched me. It was, you really saw the hurt there, and I don't think I've seen that on Superman in that way before, so that really impacted me in a way that sort of surprised me. That's any scene that Roger is in is also my favorite.
Yeah, that change my answer to the silence.
Obviously, I'm biased because we work so closely with all of these. I'm going to change my thing to my answer to giving all the voice actors praise, actually, because
That's once.
I don't know, there's just so much to this because the source material itself is so juicy, but there's so many, I feel like, moments that feel like real moments, you know, that people kind of go through. And you know, decisions that people, you know, to a smaller degree, obviously, but similar, I feel like so there's an honesty, I feel like, to a lot of it. And so, you know, I mean, as Wes knows, and, you know, Bruce, who I've worked with for a long time, I sweat, like, you know, like details of performance. And, I mean, like Travis's section, right, was just basically, like, you think that he's, you know, his superior man, it's just about fighting, but there's a nuance to, I mean, even, you know, without picture, like, Bruce and I, we talked about, right, when he was breaking down just the sort of stuttering in his voice, it gave us chills. So it's not just, you know, there's an investment, I feel like, with all of you guys. There was, you know, as somebody that's basically taking sounds and trying to match a picture to the sound, and looking sometimes to, you know, the vocal performance, what is the word that's being said, the potential emotion that's behind it. You guys all gave us something really, you know, clear to grasp onto and to sort of, you know, shine up and pick out. Again, there's just so many great, I feel like, moments. You know, one of the things I gotta give Bruce also, just the speech at the end, Bruce rewrote it, and
Just a bit of it.
but it made me think of, because your wife is your Marta, right? And I was just thinking of, like, wow, Marta must love you because you wrote such a beautiful sort of, you know, it's the thing of, like, the retirement thing of, you know, oh, I don't know, maybe I'll, you know, go to the beach and, or, you know, and cure the common cold, or be with the most beautiful woman. This is him rewriting it, you know what I mean? Like, sort of the day before. So I just felt like it was so personal, you know, and it was just really beautiful, you know. So.
I don't have a single scene. I mean, there's so many good scenes. I love the scene in the limo between Luthor and Lois. I love that he's kind of being a dick, and then she, you know, she gives him this wonderful present that's like perfect. And I love Dietrich's little quiet little perfect taste as always. It's like it's so good, you know. There's just tons of little moments like that throughout the whole thing. I'm glad somebody, I guess Vanessa mentioned the silent explosion at the end. Sam had already we had already kind of talked about that we were going to do it silent, and then our sound effects guy put a sound effect on that. We forgot to tell him, don't put a sound effect on that, and he came up with a really, really good sound effect for the explosion, and we're like, you know, that's awesome, but we're going to do it silent. So yeah, there's tons of stuff. I mean, Sam and I are both huge Svetlana fans. I think she's like the star of the movie for me. Like that scene in the very beginning when she's chasing after the bullies and she, you know, beats that one guy up and throws a rock at his head. It's like, yeah, she's my hero. So yeah.
All right, we got a couple minutes for some questions. State your name when I call you on you, and we'll go with this fella right here.
Hi, my name is Ilya. As a beach thank you for warm performance. I just wanted to say this question is especially for Roger and Jason. I'm also Russian as well. A child of Russian immigrants who are refugees from the Soviet Union. And this comic book was a big deal for me, and I was excited to finally hear what the voices sounded like. And my concern was like, okay, here we go. We're gonna have a very cheesy Russian accent. But you guys did a flawless job. You didn't make it sound like it was overacted James Bond Russian villain. It was an authentic Russian accent. And I was just kind of curious in your own experience and what you went through. What did you do to kind of like really learn it and flesh it out and really take it apart, and when you put it into your character, especially for both of you guys?
Thanks. Could you all hear that, by the way? Yeah. Good. Okay, cool. Thanks for that. Actually, so I played a Russian in a film called Hotel Mumbai that was out last year, and so I researched it a fair old bit. And the truth is that an authentic Russian accent for someone who's not spent lots of time outside Russia does sound like a James Bond villain. The problem is the real Russian accent sounds just like that. It sounds corny. But there's two things going on here. One, I didn't want to do that because he's still Superman. You have to be able to engage with him and find out what he cares about, if he's upset, and relate to him. And secondly, he's speaking his first language. These characters who are speaking Russian, who are Russian, are speaking their first language to each other. As soon as you speak with a thick accent, the message you're sending to the audience is this is not their first language, they're translating in their head. So luckily there's a bunch of Russian expats all over the world. You know, Russia has a giant diaspora now. And I found a bunch of source material I looked at for Hotel Mumbai. There's reality shows of Russians in London, Russians in America. And there was a guy I found on YouTube, and I had his voice in my head. And he sounded to me like it was a lightly touched in accent, enough to remind you where it was from, but not so much that it brought all the baggage with it. That's what I know.
You can hear me, right?
For me, it was Rounders with John Malkovich and he did me and his money, just all day long, over and over and over again. No, I have a dialect coach, a woman by the name of Paula Glott, and I believe she's got a new, really hard to pronounce last name. She's been married, and she is like, she will forget more about dialects than we will all ever hope to learn. And I came in fully prepared to do a very, very thick Russian accent, and this is where the collaborative process of working with everybody on the other side of the glass, Wes and Bruce and Sam and everybody telling me, hey, we're gonna do it like this, or not so much there, so that it doesn't kind of jar. So it's a big collaborative thing, but dialect coach, and then again, Piedet me and his money. Let's just go over and Oreo cookies. No, I don't know.
Well, you guys were wonderful. I was expecting you to do actually like Russian transcripts almost in Russian, especially in scenes in Russia talking to each other.
By the way, you're talking about being collaborative. You know that we don't ever record with each other. It's one of the odd things about animation. There's these group scenes, and it's a tribute to everybody who put it together, Wes and everybody else, that it sounds like we were ever in a scene together, because I was in England most of the time, recording it on over the line.
Next. How about right here?
Speak super loud so people right at the back.
Name's Tim. Nice to meet you guys. You guys did a amazing job. Super awesome. This is definitely aimed at whoever was involved in the writing. This is not a complaint. I think just having read the book and how to ask. Why not twist it?
The twisting, the ending from the comic. Yeah. That crazy jump start into the future thing. It's mostly practical. It's a fascinating ending. Here's the thing, I don't want to spoil it for anybody who hasn't read the comic. You should absolutely go read it. It's great. But the ending was just kind of a production nightmare. It's like having to design like 3 futuristic stages of humanity going off into the far future would be just kind of like way beyond our means to be able to do on the time and budget that we had to work with. And we also, we did discuss it a little bit just in terms of, again, I don't want to spoil it, but we did talk about it, but it was just kind of like, yeah, we'll stick with this.
I mean, that was obviously it worked obviously well either way. So like that was no complaint there, but just that.
Thank you, Tim. How about Sam's